This LongBeachReport.com special event video coverage is made possible by Joe and Linda Sopo. They'll sell your home within 30 days or pay you $10,000. By Amico Solar, Southern California's #1 solar contractor since 1974. And by DTM Security to help protect your neighborhood and business association. LongBeachReport.com is at Whaley Park, where roughly 400 residents, 200 inside the social hall, and the rest at the doors and a large event tent with an audio feed were present for the second of 4 city staff-conducted workshops on staff's proposed land use density increases. Staff opened the meeting with a PowerPoint intro and a robust town hall followed.
I am here, Christopher is here, and Linda is here to answer your questions. We will again be here all night long. I want to just reiterate that and take as much time as necessary tonight. So with that, Oscar, go ahead.
Testing. My name's Adam Elliott, Brockwood Street. Amy, this question is for you. You have been quoted in August saying that this plan will go through no matter what the residents think. Is that true?
I asked the Planning Commission to forward this to the City Council so that they could make the decisions at the City Council level. That is true.
Did you comment like that? Was that the quote?
I don't recall that quote specifically.
What do you recall, Amy?
Not denying it.
No matter what you say, I'll make it a council October 3rd.
Isn't it? Long Beach is a charter city. A charter city is not required to have the land use plan and zoning regulations agreed. SB 35, which will be effective January 1st, 2018, states that the land use plan will be the determinant factor used for approval of development through the streamlined process. AB 879, a companion bill to SB 35, and also effective January 2018, states that the planning, land use, and zoning chapter of state law shall not apply to a charter city. How do these things affect our city? As a charter city, if we adopt the new land use plan in regard to the streamlining of permits by Sacramento? Thank you for that question. It's related to charter cities and their requirements to adopt a general plan. I have the government code in front of me. It is section 65300. Charter cities shall adopt general plans which contain the mandatory elements specified in section 65302. I also have another section with minimum standards under Government Code Section 65804 that says, notwithstanding the other section, this section shall apply to charter cities. For your specific question related to SB 35, I'm going to ask Linda Tatum to answer that question.
SB 35, as you know, was recently signed by Governor Brown, and it will take effect in January 1st of 2018. The way the language in that legislation specifically reads, it says that if there is an inconsistency between the zoning regulations and the general plan, the zoning shall be deemed to dictate the use. However, it must be consistent with the maximum as it was.
I have it right here. That's not what it says. Let her finish.
So
I have it right here.
So the legislation states that if there is an inconsistency between the zoning standards and the general plan, the zoning shall be deemed to be the determining factor as long as the maximum density of the proposal is consistent with the density that's designated in the land use designation of the general plan. So essentially, it forces a consistency between both the zoning and the general plan.
Can I read the part of SB 35?
Okay, we have a microphone in the back.
Wait.
If we can get a question back there, and then we'll come back to the front.
I want to read the one little part out of SB 35.
Where?
Just one little part.
What is the section that you'd like to read, ma'am? Oscar, give her the microphone, please. Thank you.
In the event that objective zoning, general plan, or design review standards are mutually inconsistent, a development shall be deemed consistent with the objective zoning standards pursuant to this subdivision if the development is consistent with the standards set forth in the general plan. The land use plan is part of the general plan.
And that is what I said, that when it is inconsistent, the zoning is deemed to determine as long as it is consistent with the maximum density allowed under the general plan. If it's not consistent, it cannot be developed. The development has to be consistent with the maximum density allowed under the general plan.
That's true.
Okay, so we're going to go on to another question.
In the back here, and then you'll be next.
Okay. Our city council member says that he hears our comments, and we're very happy about that. What will you, as our representative on the city council, and you, the citizens who work for us, the taxpayers, what will you do with our wishes and our preferences, and how can we, the citizens, residents, and taxpayers in Long Beach truly have a meaningful impact on this coming general plan that sounds like it will be adopted? Thank you for your question. The question related goes back to my earlier statement on how these maps will be revised as it goes to the Planning Commission and to the City Council. And so, as I said earlier, the more specific you can be on your comments about the maps and our proposals, the better we can be responsive to your requests, and the better we can provide those recommendations to the Planning Commission and to the City Council.
Hi, my name is Mike Clemson. I live on Fountain Street over in the 4th District. My question is, a majority of the people who live in Southern California pay more than 50% of their rent to, 50% of the income to rent. The state has, I think, 40% of its carbon emissions coming from transportation. Without increased density, how do we solve either of these problems?
It is the age-old question. That is what the state of California is struggling with. That is why the state legislature adopted some very specific plans to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. That is why the state legislature has adopted active transportation requirements to all cities. And that is why the state legislature is taking steps to address housing production throughout the entire state. You all know that the governor has recently signed a number of housing bills. It includes
ways for density to be developed in areas that are consistent with zoning and the general plan. It also includes, again, as I said, the active transportation requirements under SB 375, and then also greenhouse gas emissions and reductions in that. The city is going to be going through a climate action and adaptation plan over the next few years, and that's going to be a key issue to how we are supposed to be reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, both from a residential perspective, but also from a commercial and business operations perspective.
Hello, I'm sorry. My name is Ann Amy, and my family owns a dental office on the corner of Bellflower and Atherton. We've been there for over 30 years. And, I'm sorry, can you hear? Okay. We don't own the building. We did at one point, and we had to dig 2 stories of parking down to be able to build that building there. And that we did that. It cost a lot of money, but that's what we did because we believe you got to supply parking if you're going to put something in there. We've lived in this community over 40 years, and we love this community, and it's been like a sock in the stomach to be reading all this for the last couple of weeks. It's a very complex plan, and I know that you have all said that, and I want to say to you in development, I appreciate all your efforts. It's a big old puzzle, and it's not easy. But I want to say that this is the perfect storm. They've worked on this so hard, but then along comes, at the same time, this SB 35, and it is a double whammy, and it just could wipe us all out. I mean, some of the things that are on here, like, yes, the plan does not require any new parking for new development. Well, that's in your plan. But when SB 35 comes through, is it not true that once you zone this area all up and down Bellflower Boulevard, doesn't that take precedence, and they can build as long as they're that close to a bus line, they don't have to add any parking, and they can go up 5 stories. I'm going to ask Linda to walk through SB 35 based on our understanding in consultation with our legislative lobbyists in Sacramento and our city attorney's office. Thank you, Amy. What I'll do is just give you a really brief overview of SB 35. It doesn't contain the minutia in the bill, but it hits some of the high points that may be of concern to the group tonight. First of all, it applies only to affordable housing projects. The goal of the legislation, as it was envisioned by Governor Brown, is to streamline very specifically identified affordable housing projects. So let me walk you through some of the requirements as they are specified in the legislation. Essentially, if and only if all of the requirements that I'm going to really briefly walk you through now are in place, would a developer be eligible to come into the city with a project compliant with SB 35. So I'll walk you through. First of all, the city would not have met its RENA application or its RENA allocation. And for those of you who may know the RENA allocation that puts in the city's housing element, it's the city of Long Beach's fair share of regional affordable housing. The city's RENA allocation for this period, which goes from 2014 through 2021, is over 7,000 units. The city has not produced that number of units, so that makes the city eligible. That's one of the criteria that a developer has to take into consideration. So they would be eligible under that criteria. The other is that the density that they're proposing has to be consistent with both the zoning and the general plan designation of the property. There are some other...
There are some other limitations on the types of properties that can be considered under SB 35. And again, I'll briefly walk you through those. They cannot be in coastal areas, wetlands, fault zones, flood areas, hazardous areas, and any other area that is environmentally sensitive or has some very specific safety hazards. The property can also not be located in any area where there is currently housing. And there are a number of provisions that are generally intended to make sure that developers don't go in and demolish existing housing just to replace it with affordable housing. So those requirements are very specifically cannot be applied to the demolition of any existing affordable units that are covenanted for a long period of time. They cannot be properties that are subject to rent control. It cannot be a property where there has been a tenant living on the property in a housing unit within the last 10 years. So you can see how all of these requirements are going to significantly limit the types of properties that are subject to this legislation. It cannot apply to a historic structure, and it cannot be a site where there are tenants on the site currently that those properties are being sold to the public. So those are some of the other limitations. I'll go on. There's another provision that relates to prevailing wages. It says that if a developer wants to propose a project, an affordable project, under these provisions in order to take benefit of that streamlining, one of three things has to be true. They have to pay prevailing wages on the property, on the project, to all of the construction, all of the contract construction, and the subcontractors on the job. Or the project has to be subject to a project labor agreement. And the city has a project labor agreement in place, however, it's only subject to the city's public project, not to private development. The third option that the developer would have to consider related to wages is whether or not the developer or the employer of the project is subject to a collective bargaining agreement. So one of those three areas of wage and wage payment has to be true in order for the developer to take advantage of the streamlining provisions. So I'll briefly go through. There are a couple more provisions, and again, keep in mind that all of these things have to be true in order for the developer to take advantage of those streamlining provisions. So the sixth one is that if the city, when the project comes in, if the city does not review the plan and tell the developer how the project is inconsistent with the city's objective zoning standards, that project is deemed approved within 60 days if it's up to 150 units. If the city does not provide comments and tells the developer why the project is inconsistent with more than 150 units, the city has up to 90 days to make that determination. So if the city doesn't review the project and provide feedback to the developer within that time period, that project is deemed approved and is then eligible to move forward. A couple more areas that, again, all of these have to be true in order for the project to take advantage. If the city determines that the project needs to go to the Planning Commission to be reviewed for things like design compatibility within the neighborhood setting, and it decides to send the project through the commission process, the state says the city has a little bit more time under those circumstances. They have up to 90 days to provide comments to the developer if the project is less than 150 units. If it's more than 150 units, the city has up to 180 days. So lastly, let's talk about parking, because the law is very specific about what those parking requirements are. It says the city may not require parking on the project if one of these four things is true. If it's within 1/2 mile of transit, if it's... Sorry. We didn't write the legislation, the state did, and the governor signed it. The second provision regarding parking, or regarding the city's lack of ability to require parking, is that if it's within a historic district. The third requirement is if there is a permit parking system in place, and that permit parking system is not available to the residents of that project. And the last is if there's a car share vehicle within one block or one block of the project. So under any of those circumstances, the city cannot require parking. Now, if there is a car share vehicle within one block of the project, and there's one more related to parking, and I'll wrap it up. Parking may not be more than one space if the project is not otherwise exempt from those requirements. So it says that if you don't meet any of those criteria, then the city cannot require more than one parking space for the project. So that's essentially the summary of all of the really significant components of the SB 35 legislation.
That's why we're here.
Okay, so I'm going to answer some questions from the people who are in the tent. Where can I access the requirement or literature describing the addition of 7,000 units by 2021? I would like to read the entire document. The document is called the Land Use Element of the General Plan. It is located on our website, lbds.info, under the General Plan, and you can click on the Housing Element link. I'm going to go through a little bit of that process. The state of California requires us The next question is about RHNA, Regional Housing Needs Assessment. 7,048 units have been assigned to the City of Long Beach for the planning period of 2013 through 2021. It's in our housing element. If you'd like to know how those numbers came about, you can ask a question. It appears that you don't want to hear that answer, so I will just move forward with another question.
Answer the question.
Would you like me to answer that question?
Yes.
All right, so I'd be happy to. So the state of California, Department of Housing and Community Development, assigned a number to the region on how many housing units needed to be developed within that region. The region was our SCAG, Southern California Association of Governments. SCAG goes through a process and went through a process in 2012 to determine how many of those units would be allocated to each city. The city of Long Beach got its assignment. It was a decrease. Our previous planning period was over 9,000 units. In this planning period, it went down to 7,048 units. We protested through a formal protest process through SCAG and were denied as part of that process. As a result, we had to adopt a housing element that accommodated growth for 7,048 units. That plan was certified by the state of California and is in effect. So here's a question from the tent. If a piece of property is currently zoned as commercial, does the general plan allow for or automatically change that property's zoning? The answer is no. Again, this is not a zoning document. This is a visioning document, much more general than that. If the property owner who owns the commercially zoned property decides to develop residential, do they need to change the zoning? Yes. What is the process of changing current zoning? The process for changing current zoning is to go through a rezoning process, that's what it's actually called, through the planning department, and if it's inconsistent with the general plan as well, you have to go through a concurrent general plan amendment. Those two processes are heard through the Planning Commission and then ultimately get voted on by the City Council. The Planning Commission is not the final authority on rezonings or on amendments to the general plan.
Amy, my question is for you, specifically you and your team. I safely assume you guys are not elected in any way, shape, or form. You're appointed. Is that correct?
I was hired.
Okay. Who was the elected official that hired you guys?
So we all work for the city manager.
Okay, so if all of these people have an issue with everything that you're trying to push through, then politically we can basically go after the city manager.
If you so choose.
That's what we're going to choose to do between now and the end of the year, to make sure that everybody standing up there is eliminated from their position.
I have a question. We have one vacant seat for a lucky individual who might want to come in. Two vacant seats.
And there's also one down here as well.
I have a question from the tent. Why no EIRs? The question from the tent is why no EIRs? They are required in all areas by law. That was voted by us for protection. That is correct. This general plan amendment will need a full environmental impact report. We cannot finalize that full environmental impact report until we get the maps finalized. So we need to get those maps finalized so that we can, and get those voted on by the Planning Commission and then the City Council. And then we will go through the EIR process. It is called a program EIR because the land use element is a program, not a specific project. The land use element under the program EIR will still require additional environmental review for individual projects. The program EIR cannot possibly predict all of the projects that may occur over the next 23 years.
Okay, I'm looking at the 5ST area that runs from 23rd Street all the way up to Britain, and that's the area where, of course, 23rd Street is all apartment buildings with, might I say, never enough parking. And then across the street is the Target complex, and then further on, of course, is on the other side is LA Fitness and whatever. I just want to clarify or at least confirm that the development to 5 stories, that's not a given, that's contingent upon the property owners choosing to put up their land for development, and also should they choose to do that and redo it as a living residential zone with 5 stories, because we're that close to a parking, to the bus line, if all that was in there and they're not required to put in parking, it would be absolutely impossible, because for those of us who live right at 23rd and Bellflower, it is already impossible for parking. So I want to confirm whether or not it's voluntary that the development goes on, and if indeed they chose to do that, if I understood you correctly, the parking situation would be horrendous.
So you asked a very good question, and it was related to a map that is for Council District 4 in the Los Altos area, and it was predicated actually on 2 things. One is, first of all, this map has to get approved. And as we have said, these are subject to change. So the 5 stories is not a guarantee this evening, right? So as soon as these maps are adopted by the City Council, whether it be 2 stories, 3 stories, or 5 stories, then it is predicated upon the property owner taking the initiative to redevelop the site. In answer to your parking question, they will be required to provide parking unless there is an accommodation of affordable housing, which is at the developer's choice, in which case they can take advantage of some of the requirements under SB 35.
Okay, maybe we have a question here.
My name is
Louise Ivers. I'm from North Alamitos Beach. My neighborhood is scheduled for 5-story buildings all down 7th Street. The entire rest of the neighborhood from the west side of Walnut all the way to Cerritos is also scheduled for 5-story buildings. Between Cerritos and Alamitos Avenues, it is scheduled for 7-story buildings. This is a very old founding and historic neighborhood. I live in a historic house. We have been told that, oh no, we're not going to touch your street, which is 6th Street, but right behind me is 7th Street. I could get a wall of 5-story buildings back there. But worse, my neighbors who live west of Walnut are going to be totally inundated by 5-story buildings. Is there some way that we can get this plan reduced so that it will only be 2- or 3-story buildings, which is the present zoning?
Louise, thank you very much. Louise just recently ended her term on our Cultural Heritage Commission, so thank you very much for your service for many, many years. So I'm going to ask Christopher to answer the specifics on this one.
So the question was, what is the reasoning behind the recommendation along 7th Street, which on your map, if you're looking at Council District 2 here,
That wasn't the question.
the question was regarding 7th Street, which on the map is labeled 5 stories. And the question was, why is that? 7th Street is a major bus corridor within the city of Long Beach connecting downtown to Cal State Long Beach and points in between. It is one of the bus corridors that has frequent service, which in state law, high quality transit area, which is bus service once every 15 minutes or more frequently. So that was the reason for the 5-story recommendation. But as the map says, subject to change based on your input. So that is subject to change. That was the reason for the recommendation. That recommendation does avoid the historic district and concentrates that development on 7th Street, which is the bus corridor.
Okay, so here's a question from the tent. Are the development fees one-time only or yearly? So when a developer comes in and plans a project that involves new construction, they are required to pay, as I said earlier, development impact fees for traffic, Parks and Rec, public safety, which includes police and fire, sewer, and school fees. The City of Long Beach does not regulate school fees. That is handled by the school district. The development fees are a one-time fee. They are required by state law to have a nexus to the impact that that development is having on the surrounding environment. So if a development is occurring, we cannot ask or require that developer to pave streets in a quarter-mile radius around that development. That is actually illegal per state law. It is overreaching under state law. A related question to that is, what percentage of infrastructure costs do developers pay, and what percentage do residents get stuck paying for years? And how long do developers pay the costs necessary to supply the development? Again, there are nexus studies that are required to be developed that demonstrate that a particular project is going to have an impact on parks or on streets or on sewers. And so that nexus study determines what the cost of that infrastructure improvement needs to be over the course of that development project's life. Typically, a development project's life is considered anywhere from 20 to 50 years, and that is taken into consideration in how the City Council sets those development impact fees. So in addition to paying fees for processing their plans, changing the zoning or the general plan, going through site plan review, going to Planning Commission, and going to City Council, a developer also has to pay these development impact fees. I will give you an example on Parks and Rec fees. Residential development has to pay a Park and Rec impact fee for every single unit that is developed. Doesn't matter who lives in that unit, the unit is getting constructed, and there is a
a nexus that someone who eventually lives in that unit is going to take advantage of the park and rec system, and that there's an impact to the parks and rec system. So that developer has to pay a per unit impact fee. The Parks and Rec Department utilizes those dollars on an annualized basis through the budget process, and they determine how they're going to spend that money. They can spend that money on new construction, new improvements on parks, things like that. But development impact fees cannot be used to pay for maintenance. So that's a key component here.
We have a question in the back.
I don't usually talk on microphones or like this, but I don't usually talk on microphones or anything, but this really ticks me off. A lot of people work really hard to live in the 5th District of Long Beach. And my question can be very, very specific. There are people in the 5th District that live behind the Hagen's Market that has been closed, and behind Stater's Brothers Market, and behind our homes are alleys. Our garages butt up against that alley. We don't want that 3-story development that this plan is talking about developing at the Hagen's Market site. And the Stater Brothers site. If you do this, I live behind the Hagen's Market, so I'm going to have somebody staring down into my backyard. What do you think that's going to do to my property values? They're going to plummet. I worked really hard to live here, and I don't need some 3-story development coming and looking into my backyard. So, what are you doing there? Everybody that lives in this district are proud to live here. We've worked hard, and we're tired of the city, maybe not you, the governor, and all the elected officials that voted for this. We should vote them out, and I just want to know what's going to happen to this Hagen site, because I'm infuriated by this whole plan.
Thank you very much for your comments. I also appreciate that you bicycled here and to Saturday's meeting. So related specifically to your question for the Hagen site, I would really encourage you to that was an excellent example of a specific question and concern. So I would like you to write that down on a comment card so that we can include that in potential changes that we're making to it. The city, as you know, does not own the Hagen site. We are not the owners of it. We are not the developers of the Hagen site. There has obviously been an issue with the owner not being able to find a retailer to replace Hagen. There is nothing the city can do about that. That is beyond our ability. What we can do is try to figure out if that retail property never gets filled, what happens next to that property. And that is a concern to us. I hear that it's a concern to you. And so that's really what we want to know is if it goes away, and if the Kmart goes away, what should those properties be if new retail is not going to be able to be developed?
Amy, I have a question for you. My name is Rich Dines. I live in Lakewood Village in the 5th District. And I think there's a little confusion here because SB 35 and this land use element, these are two separate issues, and they're trying to bundle into one. And if you read SB 35, you'll see that dozens of cities in the state actually opposed it. Huntington Beach, Signal Hill, Lakewood, Long Beach did it. And I don't know why that our state legislative committee on our city council did not bring an opposition to this bill, because I see a lot of opposition here. But, Amy, my question is this. We have met our quota for low-income housing. So if we have, why are we trying to bring density to our entire city? And we need to protect our neighborhoods. I don't support any mega development in the 5th District. And the last thing is this. We don't need our city of Long Beach to be one big downtown.
Question in there, and it was related to the city's position on
SB 35. The City Council has a subcommittee specifically for state legislative issues. The City Council also has a subcommittee for federal legislative issues. I encourage you to contact your council member to figure out how they are voting on these legislative issues on a continuous basis. Those issues are determined solely by the City Council, and staff is not involved in those decisions. The other question, I believe, Mr. Dines, thank you for your service as a Harbor Commissioner. The other question that you posed, I believe, is that, or the statement that you posed is that we have met our quota for low-income housing, and that unfortunately is not the case. We have been extremely far behind in our production of housing for all income types. Again, this housing element that I referenced earlier is not just for affordable housing. This is for housing for all income types. It goes from very low to moderate income to market rate to above market rate. And so again, we are not complying with our housing element on an annual basis. We are annually required to report out on our housing element production, and we are not meeting our quotas.
Well, how many are we behind? What is it?
So I don't have, do I have the specific,
I have a question if you're ready.
Just say it. Go for it.
So the question is, how much progress have we made? So we have a housing requirement for 7,048 units. If you just extrapolate that on an average for the year, through the year 2021, we should be producing and permitting 783 units per year. In 2014, we permitted 300 units. In 2015, we permitted 150 units. In 2016, we permitted 675 units. So there is an upward trend, but we have not met our quota for where we should be in year 3 of this housing element. So I have a question that I lost the thing for.
What about
how realistic is a blue line extension on 7th Street to Cal State Long Beach? I have never heard this discussion. I am completely unfamiliar with a concept of a blue line extension on 7th Street. It is not something that my department is involved in, either from the land use element or the mobility element. I unfortunately cannot answer this question with any assurances.
why are you only reading those questions and nobody in the audience gets to ask questions? We don't even know if those are real questions.
I have a question if you're ready on the stage.
What about the
I do have a question.
Oscar, who has the microphone?
He has over there.
I'm Ma'am. Thank you. To be recognized. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Kathy McGuire, and I live here in the 4th District. And so in reviewing your general plan, it looked to me like the overall purpose was pushing every opportunity to allow multi-level development, it pushed it to the limit. And so I'm asking, is the goal to, now that you've heard us, to bring it back and to make reasonable improvements to allow, because my concern is with SB 35, with the things that I'm hearing about what could happen because of, say, Los Altos, say the Circle Center. Those places meet all the requirements that your planning, your zoning person just outlined. So, I mean, those places could get pushed through into this accelerated, including affordable housing, etc. Tell me, how are you planning to accommodate your general plan for these changes?
That is really the question that the City Council is going to be grappling with. We will be presenting them after our 4 community meetings. We will be presenting the Planning Commission and the City Council with revised maps. We fully expect those to have reduced densities where we have heard that there is a desire and a request for reduced densities. There are other parts of the city where there may be city council members who actually wish to see increased density. We have also heard that as well. So that's an excellent question. Thank you.
We have one question over here.
Oscar?
Hi. So you were saying that we're 44,000 units short?
No, sir. I said that there are 44,000 new residents since 1989.
Right, 44,000 new residents since 1989, and we need to build more to accommodate a growing population. So my question is, if we build more to accommodate a growing population, like the 44,000 that came since 1989, is that going to stop then? Are we going to then be done? We don't have to build anything more? Or will building more then lead to us not having enough residents because more people are going to move in?
That's a very legitimate question. I do not have a crystal ball. I don't know how population trends are going to continue in the state of California, but it is an absolutely legitimate question. We are required to plan for the projections that we are given by the state. And so I do not know what that will look like in 23 years. Unfortunately, I can't answer that question any more specifically.
We have a question on the other side of the room.
Hello. My name is Heidi, and I go to Cal State Long Beach. I've lived in Long Beach off of Bellflower and 23rd for 20 years. I've never moved, not once in my life, and this obviously has a huge effect on school because I take the bus to school. I can't afford a parking pass at school, and I do commute to school with the bus. So with your proposed plan, how are you going to accommodate for obviously more traffic, more people in the community? We already have a ton of kids on the bus runs late. Are you guys working directly with Long Beach Transit and that department to accommodate obviously for all of us kids and anybody else who takes the bus, to and from Cal State Long Beach and anywhere in that area?
Thank you for that question. It's related to mobility, and the Long Beach Transit has a separate board of directors. There are 2 city folks who sit on the board in a non-voting capacity. That board is actually going through the process of a strategic plan for how to modify their bus routes to deal with increased demand in certain areas and decreased demand in other areas. The city is a part of that process, both as a, on the board, but also on a daily basis. I shouldn't say daily, but on a regular basis, because as we are projecting where population may occur, they also need to project in their strategic plan how they're going to match that population growth or shift within the city. Thank you.
Okay, my question is, Amy, I attended that September 17th meeting where your group, Christopher, made a presentation to the Planning Commission with maps. And in his presentation, he used Sears and that shopping center up the street here, and mentioned Kmart and those others, and mentioned something about going 5 stories. He was real specific about it, and having retail on the bottom, and above going up 4 more stories with apartments or condominiums. You keep repeating that these maps are under change. First of all, how are we going to know that you're going to change them? And quite frankly, we don't care about you changing them. We don't trust you about changing them. What I really want to say, Amy, is all of these people here have fought through regional corridors, FEMA flood tax, mentally ill homeless facility in the 7th District, quadrupling the size of the airport, and then trying to make it into international. And it's not going to work for us. We don't even like you standing up there with your attitude. I mean, I'm just telling you. Okay, so my question is, you keep saying the maps aren't definite and you're going to change the maps, or they're going to be changed. Well, do we get the okay to change? Do we get to see them before you take them to Planning Commission?
So there was a question in there about the maps and how they were going to be changing and when they're going to be changing. After we finish these rounds of community outreach and collect all the comment cards and information, we will be making recommendations. We will be publishing those maps before they go to the Planning Commission, and we will make sure that all of the media in the area know that the maps are going to be posted online with revisions, and those will be done before we take them to the Planning Commission.
We have a question on this side of the room.
Hi, my name's Jim Dagan. I live over on Fairbrook. Sorry. My name's Jim Dagan. I live over on Fairbrook. And just wondering if Congressman Pat O'Donnell was here tonight. He was here? I want to know why he voted for all this progressive crap. He's also a fibber. He wasn't supposed to run for Congress. He was supposed to do 4 years here. That's another story. That's what he said. You can change the vote. My question was just a statement. You keep voting for people in, and this is what you keep getting.
Okay, thank you. Another question on this side.
Hello, Amy. My name's Adina Wade. I'm a resident of the 4th District. I'm also a teacher here for Long Beach Unified. And I just have a real personal and practical question. As I look at the map, here on Bellflower, there are about 3 places where we have a 5-story recommendation, a 4-story, a 3-story, and I live right there on Monterey and Atherton, and as of right now, the trend in traffic, especially this fall, I cannot make a left turn out of my residence on Monterey and Atherton because of the backup in traffic already. And then, when I come home from work, which is in the 3rd District, I work in the 3rd District. When I come down Bellflower, traveling north, the traffic is insane. When people are coming up Bellflower and trying to make a left going down 7th, probably to get onto the freeway, it's impossible. What used to be a 10-minute drive is now almost a 30-minute drive. And I'm very, very concerned about the impact, personally, just being selfish, on my own drive to work, the impact on my quality of life of the density that's going to happen or that's being proposed. I don't see how the corner of Bellflower and Atherton can handle a 5-story unit on both sides. I don't see the area that can withstand it. I don't see the traffic. I don't see the streets that can handle it. And being so close to the university and the impact there, Mayor Garcia has already announced and was very proud that we've gotten, about 100,000 applicants to Cal State Long Beach, which I am also an alumni. I work here, I live here, I raise my children here, and it matters to me, and I'm very, very concerned, and I'm very upset that my children and I might have to suffer, okay, and I don't think that's a unfair word to use, for other people to plan how my life is going to be impacted. And so I just really want an answer to my question. Just really the traffic, and then also a side note, working for the school district, the 17 plus years I've been there, we've had a declining enrollment and have lost hundreds of teachers, and so I'm just kind of curious how that matches the increase that we're receiving from another department, how those two numbers match. That doesn't make sense to me, how we've declined in enrollment, but yet we're now planning for increased high density. So traffic and population, if you could please address those, I'd appreciate it. Certainly. Thank you very much for your specific comments related to Atherton and Bellflower and the 5 stories that are shown on these maps. Again, those are under consideration for being reduced, and you're making very good cases for why these should be changed as we proceed through this process. I don't have a specific answer for you on your specific street at Montclair and Bellflower, but Montclair, excuse me. But if you'd like, we can certainly put you in touch with our city traffic engineer, and they can discuss whether there's any proposed improvements in that area. Related to housing production, population projections and declining school enrollment, I'm not an expert in school population, but we are required to plan for the projections and growth by the State Department of Finance. I do not know how they communicate those requirements to the Board of Education for the state, but that's something that we can look into and try to get an answer for you specifically. Because that's an excellent question. We also understand that there is declining enrollment. Population patterns are shifting, and so that's an excellent question. Thank you.
We have a question in the front.
Thank you. I have to move over here because of the speaker. My name is Ray Gavlich, and I just want to make a couple of comments. Thank you. About SB 35. First of all, Patrick did not vote for it. I spoke with him yesterday, and he is against all of this. Today was his daughter's birthday, so he was here briefly. But a couple of things. The SCAG numbers, which are where they get the RENA numbers from, SCAG is a body of 88 cities. Elected representatives serve on SCAG. I served on it for 4 or 5 years. And the numbers that they project and that they promote to the cities are their recommendations. But there is nothing that I recall that's carved in stone. In fact, Lakewood said thank you but no thank you and said they weren't building anymore. I believe that if you do say no, that makes you ineligible for some grant funding. I think we've taken enough grant money. The other thing, and actually, Amy, this has to do with the meeting that just took place a couple of days ago over on the other side of town, and the public was told that they didn't have to worry about the zoning because that would come later. But I found it's called the Project Design Feature 4.4.1, and it's within the LUE, the land use element, and it says to ensure that the proposed project complies with and would not conflict with or impede the City of Long Beach zoning code, the project shall implement a zone change program to ensure that changes facilitated by the adopted land use element, those maps, are consistent with the zoning code. The zone change program shall be implemented to the satisfaction of the City Director of Development Services, which would be you, or designee, and then goes on to say how it has to flow along with the land use element. So they go together. So it's misleading to say don't worry about it, that'll come later, when one absolutely rides on the back of the other. One more thing on that, and that is that it's my understanding, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think that I read in SB 35 that the way that they can mandate these homes being built is if it's consistent within your general plan. So if our general plan does not allow that kind of zoning, they can't demand it.
We don't disagree with you.
What are we talking about?
So related to your question about the zoning implementation period, as I discussed earlier, our zoning code will need to be updated. A charter city does have the flexibility to adopt their general plan and then go back and adopt their zoning. So that is what we are doing. But we are going to be going through a 5-year period, because it doesn't happen overnight, to update all of our zoning code, Chapter 21 of our municipal code.
But you don't have to.
So I am going to go to a couple of more more questions. With proposed development, how do you plan to accommodate the schools? So this gets back to a recent question on schools. They are already overcrowded. All development is required to pay a school impact fee. That school impact fee is used by Long Beach Unified School District to plan for school improvements and for new school construction as they determine. Of Kmart on 29th Street. If the owners of the Kmart property decide to build high-density 5 stories, will the City Council vote no and prevent this? This assumes that the general plan will reflect the ability to do 5 stories. And this assumes that the City Council approves that and that an eventual developer comes in. I cannot answer the question as to whether the City Council will vote yes or no. There is no proposal at this time to redevelop the Kmart property. Why are these projects not being planned in North Long Beach, where there is plenty of room and no heavy traffic already? If you review the map for Districts 8 and 9, you will see that we are proposing redevelopment of certain commercial corridors and increasing density as well in Districts 8 and 9. So we do believe that there are sites up there that can be accommodated for new growth. Chris?
Son? Good evening. My name is Alan Tolkop, and staff, thank you for starting to listen to us. I think we all appreciate that we finally have a chance to ask our questions so we can all hear them. I have 2 questions, and maybe you'll indulge me, but if you don't, oh well. I'm hearing something that isn't making sense, and with the highest respect, staff, these are self-inflicted wounds that you brought onto yourself. You did 45 meetings, and you had 227 people show. There's more than that here tonight. And last Saturday, there were more than that. And approximately half the people never even got into the room. And that leads to the question. You're asking us to write specifics about, I don't want 5 stories on Street X at intersection Y. Well, you're going to go to 2 other neighborhoods, and they're going to write the same things about their neighborhood that we're going to write here tonight. And so you've got all these neighborhoods in conflict with each other, and somehow, and I apologize, I don't mean to be rude with this is a respectful question, why should we trust you to get it right? The problem, as I see it, is if we're all here saying don't build on 7th, and you listen to us, that means we're going to have more density someplace else because some other poor guy didn't get to have his question in. So what is your process for resolving these obvious, or what I think are obvious conflicts? And how can we be part of that process before the next maps are drawn?
So ultimately, you are a part of that process.
Sorry? I beg your pardon?
Ultimately, you are a part of that process through the Planning Commission and the City Council hearings. We are not the final decision makers, and there is a check and balance throughout this whole process, and they are the check and balance process. So you made a legitimate point that assuming that the City Council and the Planning Commission agree and understand the need to plan for future population, that the question becomes, where does that density go? And that is the age-old question of planning and land use. And so we are doing the best we can based on all the input that we receive, but ultimately it is up to the Planning Commission and the City Council to take those votes and make those hard policy decisions.
A question over here.
Yes, my name is Judy Davidson. I live on 15th Street, 4th District. We haven't really touched on this a lot. This young woman up here did. The City of Long Beach will receive quite a bit of money if they go ahead with this. It is mandated by the state, and we are being forced to do something we don't want to do, and neighborhoods are going to be destroyed in the process. So let's take a look at what works and doesn't work. And I'm tired of money going to developers and money going from the developers into the politicians' pockets. And then they do the bidding of the developers and not us.
Question on this side?
Hi, I want to take a moment and deviate from the money, and I appreciate that question, but I want to be real for a minute. I want to talk about crime and density. I was held at gunpoint and robbed on Sunday night off 2nd and Ladero, visiting my parents, and I know that neighborhood is walkable. But I want to pull up some stats with our current population, considering we haven't gotten to high density yet. I'm trying to be as succinct as possible, but specifically robbery, because that's what I experienced. 2015, there were 639 robberies in Long Beach. 2016, 743 robberies. 2017, 830, and we haven't ended the year. Now, I urge you guys to read that on your own time. I'm not here to waste people's time, but my question is very simple, and it doesn't have to be answered in detail yet, but I'd like to know what kinds of ideas does the city have when it comes to exploring safety, promoting neighborhood watch, and how would we achieve that using a plan with more density, more population, people coming from other places. So that's what I'll leave you with. Thank you.
First of all, I think you're incredibly brave for standing up and sharing that story with us, and I am very sorry that happened to you, and we certainly can have side conversations about that specific incident, not necessarily for this forum. But the point is, as I think I understand it, what do we do related to potential increase in crime because there's going to be a potential increase in population? And that's a very excellent and legitimate concern. Density does not necessarily mean that violent crime in particular is going to increase. So I'm happy to have you attend a meeting with your new East District commander. But specific to your question, the police department is focusing a lot more of their resources on community policing and those neighborhood watch programs. It does require our participation as residents as well. And those are questions that can clearly be addressed to the City Council as they allocate resources during the annual budget process for public safety. So the City Council adopts their budget annually. They have a series of hearings that last all summer long, usually July and August, and then they all do community meetings within their districts related to the priorities of their constituents. And then they have the very tough job of figuring out how to utilize the city's general fund dollars for public safety, parks, facilities, everything. So specifically, we can have a sidebar, and I can put you in contact with the new commander of the East Police Station, the East Division, and then we can talk more about community watch as well. But again, thank you very much for standing up, in this forum.
Amy, we have a question over here.
Increases in direct correlation with increased density of population. If you build high-density dwellings, the people will come, and the parents' behavior will increase
My name is Linda Scholl, and I live downtown in the district near the convention center. It's currently a parking lot. On the map, it's proposed for a 60-story building and a 250-story building. And I would like to know that city-owned property, if you could please explain why the parking would be taken away, which is currently used for all of the events, and why is the land being proposed for such large structures when it's currently parking lot city-owned? Thank you.
So the question relates to downtown Long Beach. I'm not sure of the specific city-owned parking lot that you're referring to. If you wouldn't mind saying that, I could get a little bit more details.
It's the convention center parking lot.
So the convention center parking lot does not allow residential uses at all. The convention center parking lot is within the state tidelands jurisdiction, and no residential can be constructed south of Seaside Way. So between Seaside Way and the waterfront, no residential uses are allowed. There are heights shown on the map, and that is correct. The height for the convention center area is 250 feet, and the height for the area sort of to the east of that along Alamitos and Seaside is 60 feet. That is correct, 60 feet and 250 feet, not stories. But no residential development is allowed south of Seaside Way in the Tidelands area. It is restricted by state law and something called the Public Trust Doctrine.
We have a question on this side.
There are no plans at this time for those parking lots at all. Christian?
Hi, my name is Lila. I live in this area right over close to Bellflower and Stern. And I would like to know why you have, or someone has decided that 5-story buildings should be built within 25 feet of the landing pattern, and if those buildings, or there would be some kind of an incident for an airplane to want to land, and it would hit one of those buildings, and everything would be scattered for I don't know how many blocks or miles, and I'm sure my house would probably get hit. Are you listening to me?
I understand exactly what you're talking about.
I can tell you the exact intersection I'm talking about. It is the intersection. It is the intersection of Bellflower and Britain. Right in front of the Sears store, right where the Los Altos Center has been rebuilt in the last 20 years. Is that all going to be crashed down and rebuilt again? We've already gone through that once.
Okay, thank you. I understand what area you are talking about right now. So we're looking at District 4 map related to the Los Altos Shopping Center. Shows 5-story and then a little bit of 4-story where Echo's Pizza is, Steve's Candy, and then some 3-story over there as well.
And 5-story.
5-story, 3-story, and 4-story. That's correct. Again, these maps are the ones that we are looking for your input on, and we're clearly hearing that tonight. Your question was related to it being within 25 feet of a landing area. I'm assuming that you mean the airport runway approach area. All of our general plan is required to go to a county airport land use planning commission for consistency with all of the guidance documents from the FAA related to Long Beach Airport. They have extremely strict, as you know, height controls, both on landing and takeoff areas, and if we are not in compliance with those, then they cannot be implemented. So there are checks and balances related to that as it relates to approach patterns and departure patterns related to all the runways at the airport.
Amy? Yeah, Amy turn. Amy? Before we go on, could those people come into the village? Okay.
Mr. Farmer.
So I do use the bus to get around and stuff, and you guys are open to trying to figure that out, right? Because I feel like if you guys would work into that now as you're like doing all this development, it would make me feel a little better about everything going on. So you guys are open to that, and how soon can you start working on that? Because I feel like that might maybe help some other people kind of understand the need to build and the need to bring all these, like, more mass transit and all that.
Understood. Thank you for your question, and thank you for making Long Beach your home after going to school here. So the question is really related to mobility and land use. And we do have our mobility element that was adopted by the City Council. It's one of our required general plan components. And our mobility element and our land use element must be internally consistent. So we're not able to plan for high volumes of people without ensuring that there's adequate infrastructure for mobility. Now that is not specifically related to cars. It does mean that there are other modes of mobility for everyone, including just sidewalks. You know, we do have areas of the city that frankly have a dearth of sidewalks. We have areas in this part of the city that have crumbling infrastructure, and the city recognizes that, and you as citizens voted for Measure A in order to replace a lot of that failing infrastructure.
Yeah.
So the perfect storm, if you will, is that when new projects are being proposed, that they are also incorporating different mobility options, whether it be transit, bike share, ride share, parking for cars, new traffic improvements for the streets and intersections. All of those get incorporated and are reviewed by our Public Works Department as development moves forward.
My fiance and I want to start a family here in Long Beach. We both live and work here. But it's clear that Long Beach has a problem with spending and allocating money. I mean, it's the highest sales tax rate in the state, one of the highest in the country. Voters have passed bond measures that will cost billions in interest over the years. And yet, we're going to squeeze the same people who live here tighter and tighter for infrastructure that everyone agrees is crumbling, for traffic that everyone agrees is getting worse. So if everyone here, which it sounds like it's probably going to happen, if the people here defeat this plan somehow, what is the plan B? Because we're not going to have the extra taxpayers to pay for all these things that we want. What is the plan B for actually making this city a better place, which again we all agree on, if we don't have more taxpayers paying taxes to fix infrastructure that's being used by everyone who lives in the LA area and not just actual city residents?
I'm not exactly sure how to answer that question. I'm being legitimately honest. There are so many factors that go into it, and as someone said earlier, I'm not an elected official, and so ultimately all of our elected officials have to grapple with those kinds of decisions on a daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly basis. Population is growing in the world. And so how we accommodate that is the question that we are really facing here. We can try to accommodate it within reason, or we can choose to not accommodate it and still deal with the consequences. And so that is the choice that the City Council ultimately has to make. I am not that decision maker, but the City Council is. I'm sorry I can't be, I can't give you any more specifics. There are consequences. We lose state monies. We lose opportunities to compete for grants, particularly open space grants. You do need to prove that you have a current general plan on a number of grant applications throughout the process. We also need to have a current coastal plan, a local coastal program, general plan. We're not able to do a fully involved, fully engaged local coastal